So recently I had some free time and I decided that I wanted to read a new manga series. I was browsing Shonen Jump and I came across a series called Chainsaw Man by writer and artist Tatsuki Fujimoto. Now, this is a series I had heard really good reviews of, but I didn't actually know that much about. So I decided to give it a shot. I read the first couple chapters and thought, hey, this is pretty good, and then proceeded to read all 97 chapters over the course of the next 24 hours. Now, I've spent a couple weeks reflecting on what I read, and I think I'm ready to give my review of this series. But before we get started, I'd just like to say that this review is going to mostly be spoiler-free. The only specific things I'm going to mention about the plot are things that happen in the first couple chapters of the manga. Outside of that, I'll carefully mention broad concepts of the story so as to avoid spoilers. So yeah, let's get started.
So, Chainsaw Man takes place in modern-day Japan, except in this world, devils run amok, terrorizing, killing, and possessing innocent people. Our protagonist, Denji, is an amateur devil hunter, which is somebody who, well, hunts and kills devils for a living. Through certain events, Denji gains the power of a devil and becomes Chainsaw Man. Now, if this sounds like a familiar anime premise, that's because it is. Just off the top of my head, I can think of quite a few anime with really similar plots. But while this premise does feel really familiar, the author adds a lot of different story elements and plot points to help differentiate it from these other series. One example of a really cool plot point that the author adds is how the devil system works. So early on in Chainsaw Man, we find out that devils are based on things people fear. So for example, the chainsaw devil exists because people fear chainsaws. And the more people fear this object, the more powerful the devil based on that object will be. The way that this devil system works and plays out is really interesting, and again, it helps differentiate it from these other series. So I guess the main takeaway here is that while the plot of Chainsaw Man might sound cliche, it's actually incredibly unique once you get into it. Now, I also want to quickly mention here that the pacing in Chainsaw Man is amazing. Tatsuki Fujimoto somehow makes a story that's really fast-paced, but also gives plenty of time to set up this really interesting story and develop these interesting and dynamic characters. It's really good, and I really wish more anime and manga were this well-paced. So the last thing I want to mention in this section are the emotional punches in the story. This story will make you fucking feel things, man. It will build you up with goofy antics as Denji and Power goof off. It will warm your heart as characters bond and grow. And then, just as quickly, it will beat you down to a fucking pulp. The general tone of this story is not a happy one. And I'm gonna be honest with you, there are a couple moments in the story that absolutely fucking donkey punched me. I think if you read this story and aren't emo for a couple days after, you probably don't have a soul. But seriously, if you enjoy a story with strong and memorable emotional moments, then this is definitely the manga for you. I really like Tatsuki Fujimoto's art style in Chainsaw Man. He gives it this sort of really rough look, like it was quickly sketched, even though obviously a lot of thought and care went into drawing this. I think this raw look is really fitting for the manga's tone and content. I mean, it is about a guy with a chainsaw for a head. It probably shouldn't look like K-On! Chainsaw Man is also insanely bloody, and I love it. People in this manga don't just die, they get fucking torn apart. They get absolutely fucking destroyed. The violence and gore aren't overdone to a point where it's disgusting. It usually just makes you go, oh shit, while reading. I think it's really effective in building tension in a lot of scenes and makes the villain so much more threatening and scary. Unfortunately, anime adaptations tend to get censored quite heavily compared to the manga counterparts. So, if you want to see Chainsaw Man in all its full brutal glory, I would recommend reading the manga over watching the anime. But who knows, maybe Mappa will find a way to make the anime as brutal, bloody, and awesome as the manga. The characters in Chainsaw Man are really good. In fact, I would say that the characters and the development they go through are the strongest element of this story. Let's start with Denji. A weak protagonist makes for a weak story. There are a couple anime I've watched where a weak protagonist has severely hurt or even ruined a story for me, personally. Fortunately for Chainsaw Man, Denji is a really good main character. So to say Denji's childhood sucks would be putting it lightly. When Denji was very young, his father killed himself. This not only left Denji with no family, but it also left him to inherit his father's debts to the Yakuza. In order to pay the Yakuza off, Denji spends his whole life in poverty, killing devils for money and then giving all of that money to the Yakuza. But while shivering from the cold and starving to near death every night, Denji dreams of having a normal life. Now, what makes Denji so special as a character and why I sing his praises is because of how three-dimensional he is. At the beginning of the story, we're kind of led to believe that he's this really simple character, right? He's unintelligent, horny, brash, vulgar, carefree. But as the story progresses, things begin to shift, and we as an audience start to realize how actually emotionally complex he is. And I think in the end, a lot of people are going to be able to relate to the things that Denji feels and goes through throughout this story. So yeah, to summarize, Denji is a really well-rounded character with a very compelling character arc. Chainsaw Man is home to a wide cast of fun and interesting side characters, but for the sake of keeping this video short, I'm going to stick to talking about just two side characters, Denji's roommates and squadmates, Aki and Power. So Power is what's known as a fiend, which is when a devil possesses a dead human's corpse. Her and Denji have a lot of things in common. For example, they're both hard-headed and idiotic, so they often bicker and fight. Aki, on the other hand, is a veteran devil hunter. He is a man fueled by hatred and anger over the death of his family. Now, their squad, which is Squad 4, kind of acts like a little family. Denji and Power are kind of like brothers and sisters who bicker and argue all the time, while Aki is sort of like the father figure, raising and taking care of them. This family dynamic is really important because it provides a platform for all of these characters to grow and develop in really significant ways. I can't really talk about their character arcs too much without getting into spoilers, so just know that Aki and Power are great side characters. They complement Denji's character really well, and they help make this story so special and memorable. So now we're getting into the real meat and potatoes of Chainsaw Man. This villain, y'all, this fucking villain will go down as one of the greatest anime villains of all time. The villain in this story is so extremely terrifying and overwhelmingly powerful. The slow and methodical build-up to the villain, preceded by the absolute chaos that ensues in the last 20 chapters, is just absolutely fucking jaw-dropping. I really wish I could talk more about this villain, but it's impossible to without getting into spoilers. But yeah, I would say read this manga, if nothing else than just for this villain, because holy shit, this villain is just that fucking good. So the final thing I wanted to talk about here in this review is the ending of this manga. So as I explained before in the villain section, the last couple chapters of this manga are pretty fucking chaotic and extremely fast paced. And when I first read Chainsaw Man, I actually thought that the ending was a little too fast paced, to the point where it actually felt rushed. A lot of stuff happens in the ending, and a lot of it goes unexplained. But I have reread the manga a couple of times, and I've done a lot of external research, looking at fan theories and sort of Reddit posts and wikis and all this stuff, and I've changed my mind slightly. I do still think that it's insanely fast-paced, but some of the stuff that happens can be explained. However, there are still a couple of plot holes left over, and it is a little disappointing. But I think the most important thing to note here is that this is only part 1 of the story. I think, and quite frankly hope, that Fujimoto will go back and sort of explain a lot of stuff that happens in part 1 throughout part 2, whenever it comes out. Chainsaw Man is a very special kind of manga. A story about a guy with a chainsaw forehead seems like such a silly concept, but over the course of 97 chapters, this story will put you through an absolutely heart-wrenching emotional roller coaster. I seriously love just about every aspect of this manga, from the well-thought-out characters to the badass art style. But as I mentioned before, one of my biggest problems with this manga is how incomplete it feels. There are many things in the story that go unexplained, and many of the characters' arcs still feel really unresolved. So for all the reasons I just listed, I'm going to give Chainsaw Man a 9 out of 10. The score may increase or decrease depending on how good part 2 is. If part 2 can flesh things out and wrap up the story really well, then this could be a 9.5 or even a 10 out of 10 story, honestly. I would recommend this manga to pretty much anybody I know. I think this story is incredibly well-rounded in a way that pretty much anybody can find something to love about it. So yeah, go out and read Chainsaw Man if you haven't already, and once you do, let me know what you think about it. Do you agree with my review? Is there something good or bad about this manga that you think I left out? Leave a comment down below. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Peace!